Yeah, like I said, I'd rather have you guys, talk about what you want to hear, and then we can discuss whatever we can discuss, whatever I can share, and then give you guys a quick refresher of where we started from and where we are today. What are your thoughts? Have you had any time to ingest the HC380 that we talked about last time?
So I guess one of the questions I have is, now that it's, the strategy's been out for a while, I'd love to hear some of the trends. So less about the niche kind of use cases and more about, so where are people finding the most success and where are they finding challenges still?
Good question. So if you look at the grand scheme of things, HP really started down the hyperconverged path with CS300 way back when. I wasn't here, but it was based on DL380.
700, 300, 700. Right?
That's right. It was like 3.5 years ago. It was Converged System 300. It was very restrictive. It was very focused on this two CPUs types and 4 memory footprints and some amount of capacity. Then we took another crack at it with the CS200 series, and then we did a deal with VMware VxRail, and we worked on that. So from July of last year through November timeframe of last year, those 4.5 months, we sat down and we figured out, okay, what are the 2 or 3 things we really need to go do now? Just go focus on those 2 3 use cases. And then on top of that, lay out that 18-month, 2-year roadmap, right? And strategy. And our strategy is to be the number 1 in the hyperconverged market. Looking at what things we had on our portfolio at that point, right, last year, what's our power, right? What's our core? And that's one of the reasons why we picked the DL380 for the HC380 product, is because we ship 45,000 of these a month. And 80% of those are virtualized. So when we looked at that, the customers love the system, but then hyperconverged is obviously a lot more than the system. And so we wrapped around, software storage. You guys saw it in April, right? And the intention there was to focus on one thing, right, which was VM ending. That was the entire focus. We only wanted to go after one use case, a couple of use cases, right? That was really it, because we could not eat that elephant all together in 6 months. It's not possible, especially when competitors like Nutanix and SimpliVity and others have had 5 years, 4 years at it, right? So we wanted to get our product very, very quickly. We pretty much broke all HPE rules and some supply chain rules, processes, and I drove Chris nuts when we were doing messaging and all. And just like, no, get it done. And that's, we basically worked as a startup. And for the most part, every conversation I've had after you guys in April, right? So we launched the product mid-May, right? And the only reason we had to wait, it's supposed to be April 1st, the only reason we had to wait was because of that, I think it was the Heartbleed vulnerability that showed up, and everyone was impacted. So we had to, we didn't want to launch with that stuff, right?
So what actually happened was, maybe I misunderstood what you said, we had a huge flood in Houston. So for the people that came in April, the week later, that whole center.
Well, that too. Also, that too. Yeah.
And it's more of a sidebar conversation, but we had a lot of the engineering for the 380 was on the first floor, and all the labs were flooded.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so mid-May we launched it, and since then I've had probably 80 to 100 conversations with small and large customers across the globe. I was actually in APJ 3 weeks ago, I think, and I went to Hong Kong, went to Taiwan, went to Jakarta, went to Bangkok, and met with I think 12 different customers in 4 days. Right, there's 4 different countries. What's going on is customers like HPE in terms of our products and services, the performance, the reliability, right? And so they like the aspect that HPE brings to the table from an enterprise grade point of view, right? So that's from a momentum, Tim, to answer your question specifically, the intention of HC380 version 1, what we wanted to do, we've been very successful because, if you look at the social media, if you look at our customers, all of the customers that are deploying HC380 for the use cases that we went after, they are deploying for those use cases. Hudson Alpha, for example. This is the CIO talking about, hey, so what can I do with this thing? Well, this is VM vending, right? So what you can do is deploy it and enable your end users to create VMs for yourself, by themselves. It's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I can have my scientists do it. And I kid you not, they got a POC on Monday, and 3 days later, they were, so successful in getting this deployed and ready to go, and enabling their end users to do it, to deploy VMs and get going. In 3 days, by Thursday, I believe we had a PO, right? And it's that kind of acceptance we were looking for. It's that kind of impact we were looking for. Very quick, focus on a couple of use cases: VM vending, integration with cloud. Just had a customer, do the CS9 integration on top of HC380. And that's it. That was the focus. That was the use case that we wanted to go after. It was mostly remote office locations, right?
Converting your existing customers into
No,
this
these-
hyperconverge, or converting net new customers?
These are the net new customers.
These are net new customers.
Yeah, most of them are net new customers. There are lots of conversations going on around tech refreshes right now, right? Now, those tech refreshes, that's a long sales cycle.
Are these brand new customers to HPE?
It's a little bit of both. There are some SMB customers that are new, but then most customers are, existing customers. And they're either deploying new projects or they are consolidating existing stuff. That's what was surprising to me. When I started down the hyperconverged path, my mind was, okay, VDI is the primary use case now, right? That's what the market was saying. But of the, 400 and some or whatever, of the customers that we have talked to and sold to in the past 6 months, I think maybe 5% are VDI. The rest, 90 to 95%, are all general mixed workloads.
But there's also a bunch of new customers in there too.
That's right.
I don't know I'm not sure where you wanted to go with the
Because
question, but
from a sales cycle, and strictly a sales cycle perspective, right? So customer stamped has the HPE tattoo on.
That's
I
right.
like HPE because of the DL380 or because of many factors. So I'm having the conversation with them. It's a simpler sales cycle to
That's right.
sell converged. Having a conversation with a customer who's net new and pitching the HPE hyperconverged platform versus those other names that have been out there 5 years, it's a difficult conversation.
Absolutely.
It's a difficult conversation. Yeah.
And you know what's funny? We've actually, I've actually had conversations with customers, new customers, or old HPE customers who loved HPE 7 years ago, then went to some other large competitor, right? And because of this product, actually called us back in and said, you know what? Yep, 7 years ago, you guys had these 10 problems, and this was the Houston whirlwind that I did, right? Met with 8 customers. And several of them, not several of them, I think 2 of them were like, yep, we were your big customer 7 years ago, but with this product, we started reading up on it. We want to go deploy hyperconverged. That's how the conversation starts, right? We want to go full-on hyperconverge on these use cases, and we didn't think HPE was in hyperconverge up until May. So that's the intended effect we wanted to have in the market, is to tell the market we are a viable player, to tell the customers we have a product that actually does solve several of their use cases, and we've been, for the most part, very successful at doing that. For new customers, to your point, for old customers that are going to hyperconverge and are now coming back and having a conversation with us, and actually we are winning against competitors on the on the reliability aspect of our product, on the simplicity of the product in terms of VM vending, right? And existing customers. Obviously, existing customers who love HPE, they want to, they're brand recognition. They want to go after that, and they have that patch. They have that patch on their arm. Those customers, absolutely, right? But I think it's more exciting that now, as of May, there are all these other customers who are now looking at HPE as a viable hyper-converged player in the market. Now, are we where we want to be yet? Of course not. But that is why we're working on the next phase and the next phase. And that's why we had that 18-month strategy.
Can you talk about partnerships that would either be integrated in with the platform, like VMware?
Mm-hmm.
And as a storage guy, I'm interested in position on vVols and where that is with Store Virtual as part of the platform, but also verticals, what you may want to bundle or work with in various niches to try to grow your business.
So when you say, so let's take the second one first. What do you mean by bundles?
Well, you could integrate software that was made for, say, VDI, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
All different kinds
Horizon
of verticals.
VU or whatever. Yeah.
You could be Horizon, but so you could take a healthcare vertical. You could take something else, right? So if you're going to sell these solutions, right, are you targeting partnerships, not just general workloads where because when you look at, for instance, Nutanix and what Nutanix is trying to do to create solutions in the market with various partnerships that they have, and they're terrific at partnering. One of the challenges that you're going to have is trying to come up with solutions that can compete with them for, somebody's in business, say, I'm in healthcare. I see what they have for me, all about healthcare, right? So I'm curious to know about software partnerships to try to drive vertical depth.
Okay, so I'll definitely talk about that here in a second. But Tim, did I answer your question?
Well, then let's come back to it.
Okay.
I want to ask a different line of questioning, but I don't want to take away from what Mark's asking about.
Okay, so
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay.
This is what we want, fluid conversation, so that's fine. So the whole idea behind the next phase and beyond is workload down. Okay, that's the whole idea behind it. And so I guess we can go to whiteboard.
And let me bring it up.
Here. Oh, thank you.
You want them both?
Yeah.
And his markers.
Okay. So if you think of the layers in the data center, right? So you have, this is nothing new. So you have the hardware layer, and then here you have the software-defined layer, okay, or let's call it software-defined management. And then you have cloud. Now, within SDM, you have SDS, SDN. Right here, hypervisor, right? And security, other things. Now, security really goes kind of this way, right?
I assume you put ILO in there, too.
Yeah, exactly. So security actually goes, across all layers. And then, there you have cloud cloud connectors, and then you have, public cloud. So none of this matters if, you can't put a workload on it. Now the idea here is you can partner with workloads and you can have reference architectures, and Nutanix is extremely good at working on reference architectures and solutions that customers can go deploy based on the white paper, right? Now, we obviously have, white papers and so on. What's more interesting, I think, is what happens when this layer becomes more and more intelligent, right? And then there's a bunch of companies that are actually looking to solve this problem, like or Turbonomics now. They call themselves Turbonomics now, not VM Turbo. But one of the key capabilities of Turbonomics is what? Workload placement, right? So they really go after the heart of what VMware does with DRS and so on. And then analytics. So they use analytics, they use workload placement, and then put it all together. but they're usually only mainly doing it from a VM perspective, right? But not from an application perspective, right? So there's that level of intelligence that needs to go in. Now, from a vertical to vertical point of view, there are specific healthcare applications that need to be certified, right? So there's a certification process for some of those applications that need to be done. So we're starting to kick off that. But from a vertical to vertical point of view, healthcare, oil and gas, I've had several conversations with oil and gas. Now, oil and gas has several very interesting requirements, the geospatial and those kinds of things, right? So the idea here is absolutely we are going to be working directly with some of those software vendors to provide vertical level integration, but then it's going to have to be all from a point of view of click and drop, right? So think of this as, some sort of a high level marketplace where users can go in and be able to, deploy applications. And it's that level of integration we're looking to do.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you had workload templates.
That's right.
For instance, and again, as a storage guy, I'm particularly keen on vVol integration.
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of great potential there that hasn't been realized yet.
Yeah, and that's at this layer.
Yeah,
right?
That's that layer, definitely.
Yeah, that's at this layer. So if I'm not mistaken,
I think
Patrick is coming here later today, right? So Patrick will talk about some of these capabilities.
And even Gary later on, because it's an interesting question. It starts here. I don't want to go down it right now, but there's the API, the Unified API,
That's right.
it all plays into this. So, I think we were having this conversation 6 years ago. We'd be saying hyperconverged is a stack, wasn't a structure of a stack, and never the twain shall meet. And I think it should be, when you get out of this conversation today, you really see that it's one an extension of the other.
That's exactly right. So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Wait, was that it?
Yeah, actually, just quick, Mark, specifically, we're looking at it on the roadmap.
There you go. Yep. So, but again,
Go in more detail.
yeah, but here's a key point. Chris mentioned Unified API. Now, it may be a buzzword, but it's actually one of the most critical paths to where the industry is headed in terms of integration with partners like VMware, especially at this layer. Integration with partners like application providers, integration with partners like Microsoft, integration with the ecosystem of infrastructure management like Chef and Puppet and SoftStack and those kinds of things. And then at the upper layer, integration with partners like vArmor and other players in the market like Unidesk, which is a VDI player, right? Or Horizon View, and VMware is coming up with other things, right? So there's so much work going on, right? And it all has to be simple for the customer. So let's, again, remember why Hyperconverged came into being, right? Why did it show up in the marketplace in the first place? So we were in this do-it-yourself thingy, right? Your left-hand side. And we've all been there, right? You get a server, you get storage, you get, whatever, and you decide how much memory, how much CPU, what OS, what patch bundle of that OS, blah, 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 right? Which HBA I want, all that stuff was our decision, right? And it was extremely complex. So HP and VCE and other players came in and said, you know what, we're going to solve that putting together the infrastructure for you problem, right? By creating these optimized configurations. We're going to call them converged systems, right? And it reduces your time to value. But then all of a sudden, these people like developers really were like, hey, I just need 3 days worth of development work done. That's all I need. I just need 3 days. I just need resources. And for 3 days, after that, I'll give it back to you. Right? Okay, well, you gotta wait a month. right? And you've been there, right, Tim? You were a CIO. After a month, I'm done, right? Oh, sorry. After 3 days, I'm done. Okay, you have to wait a month because we have to, start a supply chain. We have to go buy stuff. We have to provision it to you. Blah blah blah. Right? For 3 days, 4 days worth of work, the dude had to wait a month. So when AWS showed up, customers were like, you know what? Those developers, hey boss, can I just swipe my card? It's going to be cheaper for me and you, right? I'll go do my thing. It'll be quicker. Instead of a month and a week, I'll be done in 4 days. Are you okay with that? Oh, sure, go do it, right? So people started going to AWS, swiping their credit cards, but guess what? They didn't have to worry about these two things on the left-hand side, right? All they had to do was VM vending. Okay, how much resources, how many VMs, footprints. Maybe I want, this is high performance, so I need a high performing storage tier or something like that. That was about it, right? It was very simple. And that's how hyperconverged came into being. It's really in response to cloud, right? Time to market. The real unmet need for the customer is time to market. Reduce time to market as much as possible, but still gain control or have control. Because when data moves to cloud, you begin to lose control, right? And once you're in cloud, how do you come back from cloud?
I didn't understand, or I didn't see that cloud had that much impact on the advent of hyperconverged.
Okay, so what do you think?
My read on it is that, with the initial steps into the converged marketplace, the D-Block,
That's right.
Matrix, we found ourselves with, as end users, as customers, as the idea of putting together rather than a tinker toy approach, a reference architecture, a simple design. And I think that, the initial thought process amongst the Synthopies, the Nutanix, et cetera, was that, these are great this concept is great, but it's too big for 90% of our customers. Mm-hmm. And in order to address that market space and then expand on it, and particularly for tools like remote
management,
remote site.
Oh, yeah.
And replications.
On the oil rig or whatever.
Some of the unique high points of certain architectures. But I think that it really grew out of the converged marketplace.
So yes, I agree with you. So there were really two reasons, right? So there's the ease of consumption of resources, right? Not infrastructure, but ease of consumption of resources. All I want are resources. I don't care about anything else. But then for IT people, us geeks, it was more about crap. I have the 7-layered cake in here. The HPE firmware, the ESX version, the VM OS version, the storage device, and the firmware on the storage device and microcode and all that other stuff.
Which, by the way, never went away, even on the converged.
Exactly. And so for IT folks, the management, the ease of management never went away. Yes, you were able to deploy it quicker, right? But you still had to go, maintain your own matrix and whatever. So hyperconverged solved the IT efficiency problem as well as infrastructure consumption problem, right? And so that's why, hyperconverged came into being. So now, from an evolution from hyperconverged to composable infrastructure, right? With templatization and composing of resources, if you marry the two together in terms of ease of consumption, ease of use, right, with a simple user experience, with composability, right, now you have a winning strategy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so from an overall standpoint, if you look at that, right, so you go from here, DIY, to, workload optimized, so converged systems, right, to this, what I call this is traditional hyperconvergence, okay? Because that's what people are doing today. In my mind, that's traditional hyperconvergence. From the customer use case point of view, which you guys are talking about, what Mark is talking about is application layer, right? And how we make it easy for customers to consume applications to actually just focus on their day job, which is doing their work. And so then we have composable, and then we leverage our ecosystem and our partnerships, elevate the hyperconvergence above composable infrastructure, right? So think of, hyperconvergence as, the simple user experience, right? The operating environment, right? So operating environment, right? With composability capabilities, right? With integration in terms of workloads. And that's where, our winning strategy is going to be in the next 18 to 24 months is the investment into the simple user experience with integration into cloud, right? And composable infrastructure with the simple user experience focused on key use cases like embedding, but also integration, hybrid cloud integration, those kinds of things. And then with OneView as sort of the center point of that infrastructure. So when you look at hyperconvergence, you're really deploying islands of infrastructure, right? That has to be managed on its own. It doesn't connect to anything else. But when you look at that strategy, that really goes to the data center control plane, right? And so you have multiple types of platforms, and you're able to manage those platforms from a workload point of view, right? How does the workload get placed? Because you have that intelligent software-defined management layer.
So, question.
Yes.
The right side diagram.
Yes.
We talked about a marketplace, a marketplace where apps can live and you create those verticals with different partners.
And this is nothing new, by the way. I mean, in cloud, I used to work at Verizon Cloud. That we used to do marketplace all over the place, right? So
where would the marketplace sit here in this diagram here in the cloud suite section, or where is it a new marketplace, or is it going to be integrated into something that exists already today, or where should we see this layer of partnership happening?
So we already have a lot of this partnership happening at the OneView ecosystem there, right? But those are all infrastructure management things, right? So Ansible, Chef, Puppet, Staccato, those kinds of, not Staccato, but we'll have an integration with Staccato and Docker. So those are more infrastructure consumption models, right? As we mature the strategy, we'll have to figure out where the workload layer will sit. Okay. So I know it's not a straightforward answer to you, but those are some of the things that we're working on at the moment. And again, I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of how cloud works, you go into a cloud portal and you have a marketplace. And I'm using marketplace with a broad brush, type of approach, right? Because people understand what a marketplace is. But it could be very focused based on, specific verticals that we want to go after, right? Or use cases that we want to go after, like VDI, right? So,
So what does that kind of leads back into I think where Tim left off about partnerships?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed your.
No, it's fine. So we kind of like doing a little bit of round robin. I think we're now back at, you explained to Mark, I think we're now back at partnerships. And I wasn't quite sure whether we got your question on.
So what I kind of wanted to ask, and why I didn't want to diverge from Mark's train of thought there, was that when you're having these conversations with customers, does the conversation go similar to what we're having here, or are you starting from a different point? Because what I'm trying to weed out is, are you presenting this because this is a highly technical audience, or is this how you would present to a customer?
I'm
presenting differentiate that.
I'm presenting this to you guys because you guys are, a highly technical audience and living in this space. The conversations with customers, sometimes there is no slide. It's all whiteboarding, and
Where does it start with the customer?
So sometimes it starts with we are moving all workloads to hyperconverge. And this is, so we're moving all tier 3 and tier 2 workloads from, to hyperconverge. That is a very large retailer in the US. And I'm like, okay, great, that's good. What are your current challenges, right? So sometimes it starts with, we have bought into hyperconverge and we are going to go full force into it. We want to partner with HPE on that. All right. We know you're not. We know you have. You have a couple of use cases that you're focused on. How are you going to get there? When are you going to get there? To a point where, no vendor can right now claim that they can do enterprise class tier 1 workloads and hyperconverge, right? So the reason they come to us is because of our RAS capabilities of the platform. So so I'll get to you in a minute. So sometimes that's how the conversation starts. There's actually a customer who's going 100% on hyperconverge. That's their strategy. There are other customers who our strategy is cloud first. That's one customer. In fact, that was a customer I was talking to Friday. Our strategy is cloud first, hyperconverge second. Right?
Where are we going with your question? You're asking us where we start our conversation.
It's
A lot would be dependent on who we're speaking to.
Yeah, it's a big bag of mixed use cases and strategy. Sometimes it is, hey, we've got X number of systems that we are refreshing. And one customer flat out asked me, are you telling me that this can replace my my VMAX or my storage platform? And my answer is maybe. It depends on which workload you want to migrate to it.
But it sounds like customers, if they are wanting to engage in the hyperconverged conversation, they've already made the decision.
No, see, that's the interesting part. In many cases, yes,
Okay.
but I think the conversation goes in with, what do you think hyperconvergence really is? And it goes down to, we know that hyperconvergence is traditional, right? But we want to go to this. We want to go to enterprise scale, right? Many players claim that they can, but can they really, right? It's those kinds of conversations. For example, 4-socket. Nobody can do 4-socket on hyperconverge today, right? And if you're thinking about tier 1 workloads, those are the conversations we are having. Is what is it that you can do, HPE, to help us move our enterprise tier 1 workloads on hyperconverge? Because we want the simple user experience, and we want the simple consumption model that hyperconverge provides, but we also like the composable infrastructure capabilities where we have the resources and we compose resources as we see fit for our workload. Once we're done with it, we want to move it back, and so on and so forth. So it's really a very, and I know you think I'm being vague, but that's really how the conversation has
Are you
gone.
hearing something differently? Because
I see two different things happening. I mean, I see the less mature organizations that are wanting to have the technical conversation.
Yes.
But I mean, but then the other piece that I get concerned about is that I'm not hearing that up-leveling of the conversation happening, right?
With customers?
Why should you care about hyperconverged? It isn't about technology.
That's right.
Right? It's not about technology. So even if they come to you with hyperconverged, it shouldn't be about technology. It should be because there's some other business advantage that you're going after. This just becomes one of the steps along that path, or one of the components
Exactly.
to be able to enable you to get there in that journey.
Exactly.
But that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you touch on a couple of things, but it's not consistent, and that's what I was trying to kind of delve into. When does that higher level conversation come in? And maybe it's because most of the folks that you're engaging with are existing customers and not necessarily net new.
So maybe I'm not being clear. Okay. So there
I'm
are.
excluding SMB out of the conversation. I'm talking
Enterprise.
Or enterprise.
Okay. Yeah, so really are 2 or 3 types of customers. One, they've already made a decision. They are going to go hyper-converge for a whole host of reasons. They bought into the idea that they already understand their problems. They just want to go deploy it, right? So you go in there and you say, okay, well, here's the competitors' landscape, blah, 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 blah. The other ones are kicking off long-term 2 to 3 year data center transformation programs. And that's where they have clearly thought out the problems, the business problems they are looking to solve. And some of the means to that end, for example, this large, very large retailer that I was talking about, orchestration and automation. They want to automate to the nth degree because they want to make their IT extremely efficient. They want to make their consumption of resources extremely efficient, thus reducing their OpEx and reducing their CapEx. Right? And so that's number 2, right? The second customer profile is data center transformation. I want to reduce my data center footprint, right? I want to do more hybrid cloud, and here are the reasons why. This is problems 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? I want to be agile. I want a simple click lifecycle management. I don't want to have to think about infrastructure. I want to be able to focus on my day job. And then number 3 is sort of hey, I'm HPE, I love HPE, I'm living and breathing HPE, looks like HPE has a hyperconverged product. Why are you doing hyperconverged, right? I love your do-it-yourself approach. I have a bunch of DL380s. Why do I really need hyperconverged? Those kinds of customers who have already deployed orchestration layers, automation layers, those kinds of customers, right? And then it was funny, actually, I was in New Jersey last week talking to one of those customers who deployed, I think, 1,200 sites across the globe. And they're on HP, but they're all do-it-yourself. And it's very interesting because they have a very crude HA strategy. They have 3 nodes. If one fails, somebody goes in physically and then moves the drives and powers it up. It's extremely crude, right? So they're really inefficient. But these are plants. And so they're like, well, we want full HA, but low touch, those kinds of things. Is that hyperconverged? Or they didn't really know, right? So it's those kinds of customers, right? So profile number 4 is they don't understand hyperconverged because they think it's a buzzword, right? So the enterprise customers are these 4 profiles, okay? They bought in. They just want HP to help them deploy. They're solving business problems at a high level, right? Data center transformation, right? Some of them in the middle, right? And then, which is, hey, is it hyperconverged, right? So those are the 4 profiles.
But talking about the data center transformation one, the way you said it, it sounded like the customers determined that these are the problems they're trying to solve for. So they determined those separate from HPE being involved.
That's right.
Said, here's the problem we're trying to solve for. Help us understand the technology that could be used.
Not even that. Most of those conversations around these are the problems we experience. These are our challenges. And then as part of that discovery, I was in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, I think, and Missouri, and talking to this customer for 3.5 hours, and we literally spent 3.5 hours talking about it was no technology conversation, just business challenges. So we kept poking on, we went from 5 challenges to 20 challenges, right, as an example. And then the last hour was all about, okay, here are some ideas on how you can solve those problems and resolve those challenges. And then the last 30 minutes was spent on products, right? So first 2.5 hours challenges and conversation around, what is it that you're trying to do? What is your end goal? Is your end goal put everything in the cloud? Is your end goal hybrid? Is your end goal and why, right? And then an hour on how everything plugs in, and the last 30 minutes on product. And that's the most useful conversations I have every single time when customers think they understand what some of the challenges are, and then they want HPE as a trusted partner to come in and help them expand on some of those challenges. right? And those are the best conversations I have.
You have to guide them.
You have to guide them, absolutely. And it cannot be a product conversation. Yes, sir, sorry, Omar.
Okay, you were talking about client profiles.
Yes,
Profile 1, Profile 2,
That's
profile,
right.
I think I'm Profile 17.
okay.
Well, we just deploy a major, we change our data
Mhm.
centers, and we in the way we saw it as the company in charge of deploying it,
Mhm.
it was two options.
Mhm.
It's either we get a lot of money and we buy everything we need from different companies,
Mhm.
or we like pre-manufactured. It was gonna be like top engineering
That's
stuff,
right.
and it was gonna be very hard to deploy, all kinds of stuff, but it was gonna be there.
Yep.
Or the other way was build your own hyperconverge.
Yep.
Now, my question is as follows. I've been following with the layers and all this stuff, but in the HP side of the equation, all layers except the hyper visor are HP solutions.
That's right.
So if you own the whole layer, wouldn't it be a great idea to provide, like what you're showing
This?
right here, provide a one head to choke support?
Which is exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, but I cannot make granular updates. I cannot tweak my vSAN.
vSAN?
Yeah, like tweaking. Storage is the main thing
Right.
for us.
Right.
So, not being able to tweak the vSAN, not being able
I
to
see what you mean.
upgrade
Tune
granular.
or whatever. Okay. When you say update granular, what do you mean? Like specifically?
Well, specific updates that you need to bring
For
the
the
organization,
different layers?
for the different
Okay.
areas, like
Okay.
from here to there, managing.
Mm-hmm.
So the one head to choke support, it will be a great idea if it will come in every single one of the layers.
Okay. So okay, if I understand your question correctly, so HP owns all of these layers except the hypervisor. That's correct. So, and we do provide bundled updates to patches and stuff today. And so I'm trying to figure out, what you
I'm bringing the whole layers in,
right.
but I don't have the capability to do different software upgrades for different all other different software.
Oh, I see. So basically elevating hyperconverged layer to this. That's what you were talking about. Be able to upgrade the different software. So when you say different software layer, what
Applications.
Applications, yes. Okay, got it. Sorry. So yeah, so that that kind of gets into here, right, where we are able to do application patches and updates. So that's that goes back to Mark's question as well, is how we're going to leverage our partnership with application providers. For example, we actually have a great relationship with Microsoft. Right, we've been announcing. I think it looks like every month we're announcing something with Microsoft, right, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
So Ignite, we announced, Azure, and we're doing more. So we don't control applications, right? Let's be honest. It's the application provider. What we can do is provide the capability to customers to be able to do it, right? That's what we can do. So, but it has to start from the infrastructure updates, which we do provide, right? Then updates to the VM operating system, right? And then the updates to the application. And I think the updates to the application is a little bit more tougher problem to solve, because many applications don't really have APIs and those kinds of things that allow live updates to applications, right? That's the key. The ability to do non-disruptive updates, and I'm sure we'll solve those problems. Now we have solutions available today, like Staccato, right? Staccato is a PaaS solution that does application management, application provisioning, and those kinds of things. So at this layer, you can be sure that we'll leverage all of our IP, right, and all of our partnerships. Yes, sir.
Yeah, speaking of applications.
Well, really quickly, but
Yeah.
does that answer your question? I mean, it's kind of hard.
It's our main problem is to compute for the storage,
Got it.
and our updates and granular updates are going to bring us there, but we're not able right now to assign better compute for the storage side.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, okay. So that is where, you know, this part comes in.
Yeah.
Right? And this part gets all of the information from these three layers, right? The SDS layer, the hypervisor layer, and the system layer, right? And then it makes decisions based on, moving of data or normalizing of applications and workloads, right? That's I think what you're talking about is be able to efficiently consume storage and compute
Yep.
based on the need. So that's right. Is
Yeah,
that
well, it's very difficult to get that much storage in under the radar of the storage group. It's a little bit difficult.
Okay. So now we're talking. Now we're getting into a totally different conversation where you have multiple admins. So you have the storage admin, you have the network admin, you have the compute admin, and all that other stuff. And that's one of the problems that Hyperconverge looks to solve. Is not getting rid of, but kind of making IT resources more efficient. And I think this actually does solve this problem. If you have appropriate analytics, which is tracking and scaling the right way, compute and storage, you can solve that problem. So we are working on this. This is advanced analytics is actually something we are working on for phase 2. And what that'll do is allow you to actually be able to predictively, take actions.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
when you talk about analytics, it's analytics specifically around infrastructure management, not analytics around other data components.
So when you say other data components, what do you mean?
Like you're not pulling in other data components from other streams, other sources. You're talking about analytics around managing the infrastructure specifically.
So first phase of analytics will be that. Next phase of analytics could be everything about that appliance.
Okay, everything about the appliance, which is still the infrastructure.
I think
Including, it could, I mean, why could it not include the workload?
No,
it's still
I'm talking about
infrastructure.
I'm trying to distinguish between going up to where,
We're doing a
autonomy, vertica.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Right. Yeah, no.
Again, just trying to clarify where
It
where
will,
it fits in.
yeah,
Right.
so we are focused on the appliance level management, yes, but at scale, right? So not just that particular appliance, but yeah, you're totally.
But that's where I think, as a feedback, it might be beneficial to be clear about where that fits in,
That's right.
so that it doesn't just either get misconstrued or misunderstood, but it also becomes clearer and more poignant as to where it fits.
That's right. No, that's a good point. So that's why it's in this. So this is the appliance, right? And so it's in the appliance, not outside of the appliance. Because if it was outside of the appliance, that's where you would be able to capture multiple data streams and be able to take action above the appliance level. So does that clarify, Tim? Okay.
And ask that question later on this afternoon when Gary's here.
Yeah.
You talk about to Syed, who's, I'm not going to say totally focused on hyperconverged. He is, but he sees a much wider view. The session this afternoon with Gary, I keep thinking about this as being, little boy and then big boy this afternoon. But the big part about it is it's a continuation of the same thing. And I think, as I said before, 6 years ago, we would have looked at these as being two very separate stacks. And what we're trying to say as loudly as I can without overcommitting myself is that one is a continuation of the other.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so when you start talking about big data, and are you saying, are you talking about big data on a hyperconverged platform or big data, a solution on a composable platform?
Yeah.
Actually, the word goes
so hyperconverged today.
analytics, and there's some those things are so often the same, but I think in the context of within a of within a appliance, there's a big difference between analytics and big data.
Yes, you're right. So big data is a workload.
Yeah, and
Analytics in this context is understanding
metrics.
Yeah.
which is it's still doing the same thing, but
I
for
think where
different
Tim was
reasons.
going is, are we heading into a mission critical environment? That's where I thought you were going.
Is that ultimately your question?
Maybe I was leading the witness, I don't know.
No, I was just, well, maybe, but I kind of took something that Mark was saying is, I'm just trying to distinguish between how far you're going down that path, especially considering what's happened in the last 6 months.
We are, and that's what the whole 18 to 24 month plan is. For HPE, composable infrastructure with the ease of consumption model at the control plane layer, right?
Because, I mean, arguably, I don't mean to cut you off, but I guess that arguably, for conversation's sake, one could say, and I always think about this from the customer perspective, because that's the world I know,
Sure.
that's where I live.
Sure.
I look at it and I go, okay, so analytics, that's intelligence. I'm going to
Yes.
call it intelligence around the infrastructure. Other products have it already, shipping mature products.
Mhm.
You talked about some of the other products that have a leg up and have been in the market longer.
Well, 5-6 years here.
What I'm trying to understand is that what is it going to do, and is it kind of helping you keep up with the Joneses, or is it something that's going to give you a leg up ahead of that intelligence layer, that automation layer that exists with other competing solutions? Right?
That
And then-
exists or interacts.
Both, actually, because
Okay.
that's the other piece I was going to add is there's a second component which goes into the other part
That's correct.
beyond just your microcosm.
That's right. So, I'll zoom you out a little bit, right? So if you look at the platform metric that HPE offers, and when I say platform metric, think of every platform as a RAS profile, right? So you have a DL100 or whatever, or 120 versus a DL380 versus a DL560 versus Synergy. Each one of those has a very different RAS metric, right? And so if you look at platforms from a RAS metric consumption point of view, and then if you look at how that problem is being solved today in the hyperconverged market, it's a point product, right? There's a product that's built on DL100, I'm making this up. There's another hyperconverged product that's built on DL380. There's another hyperconverged product based on Apollo, right? And then same with competitors, right? Whether you look at VxRail, whether you look at Cisco, HyperFlex, whether you look at Nutanix, these are separate products. They could be managed maybe from the same platform with Prism Central, for example, right? You can manage these products from that particular vendor's control plane, but it is not considered a RAS profile. It is a product, and the workload gets on it, and it lives on it, right? And I think what's going to be interesting is most of the work right here, right? The analytics piece and how the analytics piece treats those RAS profiles and how it actually is able to make decisions on workload placement based on those profiles.
How does that manifest itself into the customer's hands? Does it show up as a separate product? Does it show up embedded in all of the components? Does it show up under one view?
So that's what we're working on at the moment. On the delivery.
That's hard.
I'm not here to ask the easy questions.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, right? I mean, they've been players in the market for 5-6 years, and I'm not going to make any excuse. I was a customer up until a year and a half ago, and I was going through the exact same challenges that all of our customers are going through. I mean, we're running one of the largest private clouds in the world at Verizon, right? Verizon Terramark, if you guys heard of it. And very large customers to very small customers, right? And they had competing priorities on how they wanted to consume our infrastructure, right? So we started with, here's a big iron storage platform, and we had all of these different use cases. There's an OLTP, an eight node Oracle RAC OLTP database connected to the same subsystem. And then there is this very low profile, general workload connected to the same substation, subsystem. And then there's a very high priority, 4-tier application connected to the same subsystem. And it's extremely efficient, right? So we went to a very efficient model where we were able to control where everything got placed, right? But then we had to invest our own money in that layer. So now, customers don't have that kind of time, right? And so we're trying to solve the problem that other people have been solving in 5 years. We're going to solve it in 2. So that's our target. Now, how we do it, I think those, and where we do it, to answer your question, it's going to be actually at all these layers. The hardware has to become intelligent, vis-a-vis composable, right? So, you guys have been briefed on composable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim has.
Yeah, so hardware has to become intelligent, absolutely. That's a must. Software-defined storage there needs to become intelligent. Hypervisors need to become intelligent. And everything has to be managed via the analytics engine that then makes autonomous decisions for customers on their behalf, right? And yeah, absolutely, that is a very hard problem to solve, but it is going to happen at all levels. It has to.
So you just need to come to Discover in December.
That's right. And come to my session, actually. Yes, sir.
Speaking of that, we said there are different applications and different application demand for different ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
How ready and is HPE technology hyperconverged for managing artificial intelligence and IoT information? I was talking with another startup a couple of months ago. It's called Clarify.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing image recognition in real time. And they said at this moment there is not actually a hardware that can manage automatically and systematically the way they handle processes. The software demands it.
That's right.
So at this moment, how is HPE ready for managing this kind of information and these kind of applications?
So, good question. Actually, I was just in a conversation last month, and it was entirely focused on IoT. So we, again, had been new at HPE. I mean, I still consider myself new, given the company, right? And there's a lot of actually focus on IoT with the Edgeline, right? And the Edgeline team is actually focused focusing a lot of their attention on IoT. I think Rick can later on today ask him that question. He'll be able to answer that question better.
Do you have any use case and any company using the hyperconverging technology with artificial intelligence?
Not that I can think of right now. No. I do know that some of our hyperconverged, some of our customers are using hyperconverged, not for artificial intelligence, but for genomic sequencing and research and those kinds of. That's right, those kinds of solutions, but not artificial intelligence today. But to your point, I think that's small footprint, high performant, type of workload that is connected to a big bad, HPC type of cluster that is making those decisions. And that work, I think, if you want to ask Rick, he should be able to expand on that.
To a certain extent, it's sort of up to the channel
Yes.
to develop reference architectures based on this
That's right.
towards certain solutions. And toward that end, not to blow our own horn, but Onyx has created a Hadoop-based appliance built on an HC 380 platform that is designed specifically for the security.
So you're using Hadoop on HC380?
Yes.
Because I've been meaning to talk to somebody who, so maybe you and I should talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I kid you not.
Said, Matt, Said.
Hey, man, yo, man. No, I kid you not. I've had so many people within HPE ask me, "Hey, will Hadoop work?" And so before HPE, between Verizon and HPE, I was at Limelight Networks, and I was VP of engineering and DevOps, and we had very, very large 100+ node Hadoop clusters, Cassandra, and whatever deployed. But it never occurred to me that we could translate that into hyperconverged.
It really sort of breaks the model of
Yes, it
hyperconverged.
does.
But I think as a hardware platform with a different use case, and potentially even using sort of virtual as back-end storage
Really?
while solid state.
Oh yeah, so we do have an all-flash version, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's
So
very credible and believable, right? I mean, that Cisco security product, I can't remember what it's called. It's a 31 node,
Yeah.
33
Yeah.
node Hadoop cluster.
ASR?
And it's all,
I have to look it up, but it's got a different name.
Oh, okay.
It's what they're using to record everything that happens in their data center. It's a security.
Oh, okay.
It's a 33 node Hadoop cluster
Okay.
um,
Yeah, and
for analytics. That's what
Yeah.
it's used for.
So Matt, you bring up a good point. So again, go back to the what is hyperconverged. The reason I called this traditional hyperconverged is because the market has bought into the idea that hyperconverged is nothing more than scalable nodes with internal storage wrapped around with software-defined storage and a user experience. Right? That's the current mentality around hyperconvergence, right? In the marketplace for the customers, right? Everyone agrees there, right? I'm not saying that's the right definition. I'm saying that is the definition that is most acceptable. Yes? No?
I say yes.
I have a question from the audience. It's
I don't
probably
know
something dumb, but do you think in the future an artificial intelligence can manage a hyperconverged infrastructure based on the APIs that you have for HPA Synergy?
Well, okay. So you would have to have a lot more than just Synergy APIs.
Ask that question.
Yeah.
Ask that question this afternoon with Gary. I think, I'm not going to say you're not going to get a better answer, but Syed can answer it now, answer it again this afternoon
Yeah.
with Gary. I think you might get a slightly different answer.
Yeah, so there are two things, right? The Synergy composable API sets are infrastructure in the load, right? And they compose resources based on needs of the workload, right? And I think and then yeah, absolutely, Gary should answer that question. But if I get your question, if I understand your question properly, are you saying that will artificial intelligence manage this and make decisions for you at all these layers? Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't see why not. But then it has to have APIs
At every layer.
at every single layer that are interconnected to this analytics engine with workload, right? And the analytics engine should have enough resources to be able to make those decisions on the fly, right? I don't see why that's not possible. But it's a lot more than just
It's not going to happen tomorrow.
composable. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not available today for us.
Oh no. It's going to be more than composable hardware.
Pound not available today.
No, pound not available today.
No, I was talking about with this guy about the simplicity of managing infrastructure just
Sure.
possible.
Sure.
And he said if it's that simple, maybe it's possible for an artificial intelligence to actually manage the server for you. And I said,
So that's an interesting question. There are several software products that are doing predictive analytics, which is really what this is, right? We actually have a product called Cloud Optimizer that does predictive analytics, right? There's, Turbonomics is one, but then the ecosystem around that product has to be connected to that analytics engine or the predictive analytics engine, right? And that's where most of the challenge is. But then that layer has to become intelligent, even more intelligent, to become artificial intelligence. Because when I hear artificial intelligence, I'm thinking Skynet.
Yes.
That's what I think,
I
right?
mean, I have to think though that this is a common thread amongst everybody making these systems, because Intel talks about a little bit different. They talk about metrics for collecting information. They talk about monitoring for real-time awareness of what's going on. They talk about modeling, which is what are the capabilities of a system configured this way or that way? What can it do, right? And so, I mean, Intel is the company that provides everybody the chips and the basic underlying hardware and firmware is working on this, doing research in this area too.
There's a reason why Splunk is so successful in the marketplace, right? They do a lot of those things. But then someone has to take that data and then do something with it. They're just collecting a bunch of data, right? Who's going to take action?
Right.
That's the question you're asking.
These are hard problems, but they're talking about doing them, and Intel's had very success over the years of trying to do big system level things. A lot of them have failed, but they really are. It seems to me pretty sincere about getting their arms wrapped around trying to drive IOPS to becoming commodities instead of scarce.
Yeah, agreed.
And that will change the way all of this works radically.
That's right, and that's where most of the hyperconverged challenge is how you translate workload into available resources and put the right workload in the right place. Right. To me, that's really hyperconvergence, right?
Do you expect that the hyperconverged will become part of the composable story? Do you have like a plan for the next several years?
HPE's infrastructure management strategy is composable infrastructure. And so hyperconverge, traditional hyperconverge, is a step towards composable infrastructure, right? Now, what is composable infrastructure? You have, what you have today, and then, you add the simplicity of the operating environment above it, right? And so the answer is yes, composable infrastructure is the next phase of computing for HPE.
Thank you.
So, I probably shared a bunch of interesting insights.
So you got 30 minutes.
Oh, I do have 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Well,
it was
less than
30.
30. No, it's 45. So there's a few other slides in that deck, what we talked about earlier, and it was more kind of that stuff.
Yeah. So okay.
A few more there. I'm not trying to say stretch it out, but
Yeah. So great discussion, right? I mean, am I answering the questions and because I'm not holding back. I mean, there are things that we're working on. There are things that we're thinking about working on. There are things that we're not even thinking about, right? And
I want to ask you a quick question as well. So I live in my ivory tower, and as I said, I don't get out very much.
He does, I don't.
Not as much as Syed does, but everything we've been reading about hyperconvergence is that there's a lot of interest in it. Get that. When I read analyst papers and try to get a better understanding, and I think you picked a lot of this up when you did a lot of customer testing earlier this year, a lot of people aren't really clear about what they're using hyperconvergence. And we want to pick your brain a little bit to say, are you hearing something differently, or are you getting the same thing that I'm reading from the analysts? A lot of them are, we're investing in hyperconverged. Not quite sure what we're going to use it for. It's more in my sandbox and not in either anything dev, anything test, anything in production. And nothing mission critical. So I can read a whole lot of articles about what our competitors are doing, whatever. There's a lot of big plans, but I'm still kind of curious to know, who is actually doing what with it. A lot of interest in it.
You're just bringing out an example.
Yeah, I'm asking a question if you guys are hearing.
I don't have those conversations. My customers who are looking at this particular, or any hyperconverged for that matter, are finding a use case wherein it makes sense. Or they are coming to me for recommendations on small architectural re-ups, etc. Very often the use case is VDI. Very often the use case is remote office, back office, or replicated environments. We do get a lot in standing up a remote site for replication for backup or DR.
So backup as a service or something
Exactly.
like that. Yeah.
What we're finding is, you have a strategic conversation with the customer, and they say, this is what I need. And in my mind, I'm going through potential use cases and trying to figure out if this is a viable solution, not just today, but down the road. And obviously, more likely down the road than sometimes today, but very often it's perfect for today. It depends. And I think you have to rely on your intelligence to say, is this a good use case to implement this? And then make the recommendation.
So what are the limitations you're running into when you say, hey, so I've had many of these conversations as well, but I'm curious, when you talk to your customers, when do you say, no, don't use hyperconverged for that?
I don't theoretically say no. I come to that understanding in my mind. There are limitations. The sheer volume of storage. When you've got X number of bays, X number of drives, the Samsung 3.8 terabyte drives are not really out yet.
That's right.
Cost prohibitive.
And performance prohibitive.
There's all sorts of limitations. So, we're not really finding ourselves limited in terms of horsepower.
Okay.
3 sets of CPUs is going to give you a decent amount of horsepower. It's going to give you enough RAM to handle a nice small.
Well, yeah, this thing has 1.5 terabyte per node. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are limitations, and one of the problems with Store Virtual at this point is connecting to an external storage device.
Store Virtual or AC380?
Store Virtual in a hyperconverged solution.
Okay.
You can make an iSCSI conduit to external storage, but you're going to get a performance hit that may not be technical.
Okay.
So you've got to think through these use cases.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I still want to go back to where Tim was, and when we talk to customers. Nah, they don't. So it's something.
Tim, we promise we're not ignoring you, man.
No, I'm just kind of curious. So, where are we taking this conversation? Is it a different conversation with customers? And what I'm trying to do is to really understand where your head is going about, is there a better place to start this conversation? Or are customers looking for a completely different kind of conversation? That's right.
Yeah, the
I'm
conversation.
thinking your brain as opposed
Yeah,
to
the conversation I have with customers is it starts in a totally different spot.
Yeah. Okay.
It starts at the top and goes down. It doesn't start anywhere near the bottom, it goes up. And that scares the bejesus out of technical folks because they see it potentially as,
That's right.
crap, what am I going to do kind of moving forward? But I think once you start to have that more wholesome conversation, people start to buy into it. They start to understand it. But it requires the willingness to have that honest conversation. And that's why I was trying to kind of ask about where the conversation starts with customers versus this group, because it's a different audience, right?
And it really is those 4 profiles.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. But then I also look at some of the conversations and successes that some of the hyperconverged competitors are having, and some of them are starting from the top and coming down and having some strong success with that. So I'm trying to put the different pieces together to understand patterns. But again, I go back to the conversations I have are
The flip side of that is,
top-down.
the
And
flip
so
side.
hyperconverged just becomes one waypoint along a continuum,
That's
right?
right.
It's not where hyperconverged is the next step as I go through this, but rather to say, there's a very specific use case that hyperconverged fits in.
Today.
Correct.
Yeah.
But there's a very specific use case where composability could fit in,
That's right.
right? That's a whole nother conversation because I think and we've had many conversations with I think that's a completely misunderstood space. And then, of course,
What is misunderstood? Hyperconverged?
Composability.
Yeah. So
And then you get into cloud and the rest, right? But my point to this is that the conversations I'm having are, those are just answers to be able to, or tools that I'm leveraging to be able to solve bigger problems
right.
as I go through it. And those bigger problems have nothing to do with technology.
I completely agree.
And it doesn't
Top
matter
down. Yeah.
whether it's a blue badge or green badge or red badge, it doesn't matter.
It's irrelevant.
It doesn't matter. And that's why I was kind of hoping we would see some of that here, is that how you're differentiating as you go through that,
So that's what this next 5 minutes is. But yeah, I totally agree. You know, the funny thing is you mentioned some of the other players in the marketplace, because there are several conversations that I have with customers where we're starting at the top, right? And other people are starting at the bottom because they're geeks who love that product, right?
Hyperconverged, I'm gonna have a hard time starting at the bottom.
But you know, I hear you, but it's really sometimes it is, oh, yeah, I love that product. It's so cool. It looks, it's got all these knobs and blah blah blah, right? So that's the geek effect, right? But we're starting at the top, others are starting at the bottom, and then sometimes it's flipped where we're starting at the bottom, others are starting at the top, and sometimes it's in the middle, right? And it's very interesting. It blew my mind when I started working here and started talking to customers, because, I'm still kind of looking for that, perfect use case, but there isn't any, because I've had conversations around VDI, I've had conversations around, Hadoop. I mean, it's all kinds of conversations, but it really, to your point, needs to start with the top down. And so when it comes to top down, one of the conversations I've heard about is, you must have dedupe and compression, or otherwise you're not a hyperconverged player. And I kid you not, there have been so many RFPs where it's a checkbox, right? And dedupe compression, don't have it, you're out. And that is one of those, Tim, to your point, that is one of those technology conversations. Sorry, Tim Smith and Tim. It is the technology conversation, right? So what is the real unmet need of the customer when it comes to dedupe and compression? It's storage efficiency, cost, scalability, right? Those kinds of things. But is it really, and I was actually talking to a customer in APJ, and they said, well, I can get, better latency, lower latency from X provider. I said, okay, so what is more important to you? Reliability, availability, flexibility, right? If you look at, this isn't working, so if you look at what are the basic business requirements, right? And then you distill that down into enterprise workloads. The basic fundamentals of infrastructure that everybody now today takes for granted is RAS, right? We expect that any new age product is going to have RAS capabilities, right? Do you ever have a conversation with anybody now as a customer about RAS? I remember when I was working for Sun, we made this big deal in 2000 about RAS, how Sun was awesome and RAS was all a big deal, right? Now, absolutely, right? But now it blows my mind that many of these newcomers in the marketplace, aren't really as RAS as they could be, and yet they're having success, and that's because we're not having the basic conversation, right? So I explained to this customer, hey, the way they're able to bypass the latency, and I'm not going to mention any names here. So the way they're able to bypass their latency is, let's say, they have a 3-node cluster. When a write comes in, it goes to cache, but before it's committed to rest of the nodes, an ACK goes back. Right? Now this is how normal storage works. But in But in normal storage, any Clarion or VMAX or 3PAR or whatever, you have 2 storage controllers. and anything written to cache is mirrored, right? So if this thing goes away, your data is still highly available, even if it's not committed to storage. But in this case, it's not. There is no mirroring of cache going on here. So if this node goes away before the data has been committed, your data is gone. You will have data corruption. And that has happened. And that, so they're able to improve latency by doing this, but then they're exposing the customer. So to us, RAS is the basic fundamental. And so store virtual, when you look at the design and how it lays everything out, that's why we recommend RAID 10 and hardware RAID in the node to provide that basic 5.9 type of capability. So what are the customer business requirements? My data needs to be available, cost, efficiency, those kinds of things, right? So that's why RAS is the most critical. Then comes the ease of consumption of infrastructure, right? Operating environment usability. I want to be able to provision it quickly. I want to be able to patch it quickly. I want to be able to manage it easily, right? And that's a very hard problem.
Right, and that's typically, in my opinion, how a lot of the smaller players elude that first level conversation.
That's right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. They bypass the first level conversation because it's really cool, that middle layer.
Right.
When that middle layer is really not the most important part of infrastructure, and it's not really the most important part of the problem customers are solving, because after this 5-minute conversation, they were like, okay, well that's it, they're out.
Right.
Let's talk.
But that's a single pane of glass from the management perspective.
This?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So how do you put the pieces together to do what he's saying as far as the management?
No. So this vendor provides that very cool hyperconverged operating environment. I'm talking about how I/O comes in, how data I/O comes in, right? So to us, RAS is the most important capability. We build that in, then the next level up, and then the nice to have features. Now there are ways to solve compression and dedupe and expansion and usability, those kinds of things, right? There are other ways to do it. Store Virtual certainly has capabilities, thin provisioning and thin replication, those kinds of things. That helps with that. Now, does that mean that we don't think dedupe and compression is important? It's absolutely important. But if you look at the grand scheme, actually, if you go to, I'm sorry?
It's a nice to have, like you said.
It's a nice to have in our opinion. Dedupe, which is the one workload that dedupe is best for. Not every workload, right? In fact, I had that conversation with many customers. VDI is probably the most optimized to take advantage of dedupe, right? If there's nothing to dedupe, why would you want to enable dedupe in the first place? It doesn't make sense, and why pay extra?
But in a virtualized environment, you can count on a hand how many apps don't dedupe very well. And when you're talking about scale, dedupe's a big part of it, right? I think you're making a mistake here. Dedupe is not a feature. Dedupe is a main core scalability function.
So explain that to me. How does
hard,
dedupe
right?
help with the
So
scalability?
I've got lots of VMs with Windows on it, Windows Server on it. They don't have to be VDI. I'm going to dedupe all of that stuff, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It has to be the same.
I've got other workloads too, especially office environments, office environments where you've got a lot of spreadsheets.
If you send out a PowerPoint
all of that
email,
stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, dedupe can save you a terrific amount of
Capacity.
cost and storage capacity, right? So
those are still targeted use
same
cases.
thing.
Those are still targeted use cases.
Yeah,
email targeted use case, and email is moving to Office 365 and Gmail. So
right, but I think it's a mistake to say that dedupe is a nice to have feature and not, because I think a lot of people would say, yeah, you know what, if I'm going to be virtualizing a lot of the traditional workloads that I have, I need it. Otherwise, it's silly to buy it without it.
No. Again, so I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. What I'm saying is you have to determine the right workload for it to enable it and pay for it.
Or why are you going to put it in there if you're not going to use it?
That's right.
Yeah, so
That-
my
that's my point.
point though is that I think you should look at the workloads that actually won't use it and say, well, let's see if in these environments 80% of the workloads actually will. Why worry about identifying them? It's okay. So if I'm going to be running SQL, big SQL, I'm going to be running Oracle, I'm going to be running something else.
You don't need
Media,
there.
media. I don't need it for media.
That's right.
I don't need it for database. I don't need it for transactions. I don't need it for media.
Mhm.
Okay, I can use it for just about everything else in my environment.
But what is it? So okay, what is everything else? So if you're running SQL
I
on
already talked
Windows
about
2012, I'm just making this up. But yeah,
I know,
mean,
but I told you, SQL, Oracle, I'm talking
Right.
database, transaction, media. Okay, doesn't need dedupe.
right.
So let's not get.
Yeah. So
No, but
so
I'm trying to,
no, I totally. So I'm not disagreeing with you.
I'm trying to help.
No, what I'm saying is to us, and to Nutanix, by the way, if you go to nutanixbible.com, search for dedupe, and in there they would say, for most use cases, compression is good enough, right in their Bible. So I would recommend that you go and search for it. But
I'm not going to take my last word from Nutanix.
yeah, well, I'm just, and I agree with that completely. What I am saying is dedupe has a place in the infrastructure.
That's fair.
Absolutely.
And I think even to Amar's point, it's there when you need it, but it's not a have to have. It's there on the use case you want.
That's right.
Oh yeah, I mean there are plenty of times when it's a real pain in the ass too, right? When you have to rehydrate data for whatever reason,
That's right. If it's not in
it's a
90
pain in the
yeah.
ass, so it's not ideal. But I think for a lot of customers, it's like, yeah, it's,
Well,
it's table stakes, is what I'm saying.
So yeah, so it's again depending on scalability, right? So you talk about it helps with scale. It actually doesn't help with scale as much because of the performance hit that you can actually get out of it or have out of it. I've had customers tell me 20-30%.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, and that's the thing. You have to figure out the right use case for the right reasons for the right features. That's what that top was about, right? Compression, totally agree. That is something that pretty much most workloads will be able to take advantage of.
You're on a 10-minute call.
I actually have another call starting now, so I gotta wrap this up. Here, this is exactly what we're talking about. We just mentioned it. Dedupe, compression, those things have a cost associated to it, whether it's performance costs, whether it's licensing costs, those kinds of things. So, nothing new to you guys. I think you guys get this, right? And I don't think we're debating or disagreeing. I think we're saying the same thing. So that's really the point here. Both dedupe and compression, it's on our roadmap. We're gonna have it, and Patrick will talk about that. As far as latency is concerned, talk about how some people are solving it. To us, RAS is more important. We'd rather preserve the data and not corrupt it. Who would do unlimited scale with any type of platform? Sorry. Would you ever deploy a limitless cluster of anything?
It depends. Like, for example, Nutanix, you're gonna put in their ECM, you're gonna bring Cisco. There are many other, if you have the money.
Do you think No, it's not about the money. Do you think the file system layer or the infrastructure or any hyperconverged appliance can actually sustain a limitless cluster size?
You're talking about Helium?
Forget about cost.
You're talking about Helium?
No, any. Whether it's Nutanix, whether it's HPE, any. I have never seen.
Yeah, cloud object storage kind of does that.
Well, yeah.
Right. So
it's software defined, so it's actually spreading data across multiple objects and multiple locations. It's not doing a single cluster of something.
Oh no, it's widely distributed.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
Storage. Oh, but you asked a question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
It depends on how it's implemented. I mean, you've got diminishing returns when you reach a certain point.
Exactly.
Depending on how the storage is implemented. So
Exactly.
for anything to scale infinitely, at this point, I don't think there's any technology
Exactly.
to do that.
I know, but that's the strategy.
But that's the
that you
claim-
have in AWS S3, for instance, and it seems so far it's working pretty well for them.
Yeah, well, and I guess it all depends on how it's implemented and where they're out on that curve of diminishing returns.
It's multiple clusters, multiple geos, multiple locations, right? It's not a single cluster. So there are several vendors that claim unlimited, and then there are actually customers who say, oh, well, they say unlimited. You're only 1632. I'm like, okay, well, are you going to deploy a 1,000 node cluster? Anyway, so that's the point of that,
It's a
right?
checkbox in the RFP.
Yeah, yeah.
There may be people inside HPE trying to figure out how to do that with Scality, for instance.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But that's a different infrastructure and architecture design model. So Hyper-V, that's on the roadmap. KVM, that's on the roadmap. But how many customers are actually deploying tier 1, tier 2 workloads in KVM? So those are kind of things that I wanted to touch on as far as feature deficiency is concerned on our roadmap, right? So those are all there. Let's see. I think we've discussed most of this. There's some roadmap stuff. The real point here is really our cadence. So we went from 12 to 18 month cadence of updates and new products to 3 months, right? So we're making updates to the platform every 3 months, and we'll continue to do that. So that's how fast we're moving. We're adding features, we're adding capabilities. Some of this we talked about, hypervisors and so on. So
It's interesting, just go scoot back a slide. You mentioned this.
Can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
It's 1.1 on the 380.
yes, that's going to be available next week.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry.
No. Go, yeah. So this is interesting. You mentioned it earlier. It's so there are some people in the audience that think that HPE is an archaic company and slow moving. But it's interesting. This project, amongst others, but this one in particular, you framed it up. It actually broke a lot of rules to get us into a way different kind of mode of engineering, which has now become a foundation for how we're developing in the future.
That's right. So the real only point here is not to show what cool stuff we're working on. The point here is our cadence has completely shifted. Remember what I said when I started. We are working as a startup within HPE. Okay? That's the point. And we've got support from our leaders. Rick will come and talk about it, ask him the questions. In fact, Meg was the one who challenged us back in November and said, you know what? We got to do something very, very quick. And we got to have a quick cadence, right? So this was one of the 2 products that she talked about in April as the model of how products should be developed, the AC380, right? And so that was the point. One other point, we're not just thinking about products, we're also thinking about services, okay? Attached with the product, because that's extremely important to us. So, we have a BU called HPE FS, HPE Financial Services, and we're partnering with them to do all kinds of interesting things. So, having come from cloud, I think this type of model is very near and dear to my heart, and that's what really customers are looking for, is ease of consumption and ease of acquisitions. Customers who don't have capital expense, right? They want to have a pure OpEx model.
This is perfect.
This is simple. So
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
we announced this at Discover, $11.30 per desktop per month, as low as that. And then if you go to AWS, it's $18 a month. And so per desktop, right? So if you look at all of your data center expenses, right, and Tim and others, you may know what that is. But it's not a delta of $7 per desktop, right? Per VM. I'm talking about admin cost, I'm talking about power, I'm talking about cooling, those kinds of things. They're not going to be $7 per desktop, I guarantee you, right? So we're going after, a cloud-like economics with cloud-like experience with cloud-like economics. That's really the point here.
And it's a cloud-like experience. And
That's
I
right.
think that's the thing. So I always worry when we show a slide like this, because it's like, oh, that's a money slide. That's a product. That's HPE technology at work. But
Yeah.
I think you said it. I just want to clarify it again. This is an experience. And
That's
I
right.
think
To Tim's point,
Yeah.
so the point here is not that we have a cool offering. Tim C's point. The point here, I'm graduating him slowly. The point here is not to show that we have another cool service or something. The point here is we're solving a business problem here, okay, and how customers consume our infrastructure and our products. and making it easier and more cost effective for them.
This is more of a conversation where now you can go top down.
That's right. And this is available today.
Right.
And in fact, in the next 2 to 3 months, we're actually doubling down on our cloud-like economics model.
But this use case is specifically VDI.
This particular one is VDI.
So based on this, are you finding that most customers are truly comparing you against AWS?
Based on this, some customers are comparing us against cloud. Not AWS, but against some.
Okay, you're mixing pieces together, so you're confusing it. This slide talks to this slide talks to VDI as a use case. For VDI
as a service,
are customers truly comparing you against AWS is the next, the real alternative that they're comparing you against?
Oh, so you're asking a specific question.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
because that's what you're presenting in the slide. I mean, if I read this slide, what it communicates to me is that most customers look at it's either going to be HPE or AWS for VDI.
So, okay.
Is that truly what you see? Because I see something vastly different for VDI as a use case.
No, so VDI as a service use case, not VDI use case. So VDI as a service, maybe I need to clarify this slide.
Okay.
For VDI as a service use case, many customers want to see what they can do on-prem but still provide that cloud experience. And so I use AWS in the financial modeling
As a price point.
as a price point.
Right.
The point is not that most customers are doing VDI as a service, us versus AWS. The point is many customers are now doing VDI as a service in the cloud.
So what's the cost on that?
What? Yeah. So there's Microsoft, there's AWS,
VMware.
there's VMware, exactly. So desktop as a service. And so what is sort of the cost model? Now AWS seems to be the most prevalent one. That's why I use the model there. So the message is not most customers are coming to us and saying, oh, we want VDI in the cloud. For customers who are doing VDI as a service, we just use a comparison model.
And
Does that clarify?
and
I
CapEx.
think it's still confusing.
Oh, okay.
I think it's still really confusing.
So maybe I need to update the slide. The idea here is we have a VDI as a service through HPEFS on HC380. So for customers who want VDI as a service for their end users and pay per consumption for desktops, this offers them infrastructure, licensing cost of the software, right? All inclusive on a per month basis.
Yeah, it's not all inclusive though, because you're not taking into account any of the data center administrative.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Yeah, that's what I said earlier. So the delta between $11.30 and $18 is $7.70 per desktop. So to power a node, and depending on the number of VMs you have on that node, it is not going to cost you $7.70 per desktop. Delta, right?
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then the
That's
other
the
piece, the other piece I think just becomes confusing is comparing it to AWS, because that's, again, I'm just basing this off the conversation that I have. It's not, I mean, AWS is not something that's seriously considered.
Sorry.
For a lot of different reasons.
Fair enough.
But there are other solutions that are considered, and I think.
VMware, Azure,
Yeah, well.
and others.
Yeah, and others, and I think those would be a much more representative comparison.
Okay.
That's
good feedback.
It seems like a reach.
That's
why
good feedback.
I worry with this slide. It's not the best one to end, unfortunately. But actually, talking about ending though.
Yes.
You're 4 minutes over.
Okay.
And your phone rings, and I know that you've got a dash and something.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And there's a break. Yeah.
Great discussion, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Really appreciate it.